The middle-aged adventurer who returned from another world finds that nothing changes even back in Japan. Kumaki. Episode 1. In the western region of the Kingdom of Tuar, there is a vast forest. Located about 2 days on foot from the trade city of Hexaria, this forest remains largely undeveloped. Although some investigation has been carried out, the deeper regions are covered in primeval woodland where unknown monsters roam. The Kingdom of Tuar, seeking more land, attempted to develop the forest, but the large number of monsters slowed progress to a crawl. Then one day, a massive rumbling shook the entire area, including the forest. As a result of the tremor, a cliff near the forest entrance split open, revealing a mysterious ruin behind it. A structure created by unknown hands. A dungeon. The discovery of a new dungeon sent adventurers into a frenzy. If this newly found dungeon was genuine, one could expect ancient weapons, magical items, perhaps even high-quality ore or precious gems. Adventurers rushed in, each eager to be first. Those who ventured inside did not find any remarkable treasure, but they did notice that the patterns and architectural style carved into the ruin differed from anything known. As a result, a research team was dispatched. The adventurer Sai was hired as part of the escort unit for this expedition. He wore light armor made of magical beast leather reinforced with magic steel plates. He had long, dark brown hair. A veteran adventurer over 40 years old. In his youth, he had specialized in monster extermination as a hunter, and he had cleared more than 20 dungeons in his career. For that reason, he was selected to serve as the scout for this mission. According to the adventurers who had previously entered, the place seemed safe, but there was always the possibility of danger. A ruin of unknown design could contain unknown threats. Traps could change from one day to the next. Anything was possible. Among the research team were noble scholars as well. They were said to be broad-minded nobles, but if even one of them were injured, the Adventurers Guild would face severe reprimand from the House of Nobles. Thus, Sai and the other escorts were tasked with ensuring the researchers could proceed smoothly. Several hours after the team entered the ruin, a few things became clear.
This ruin is buried underground, but it was originally a tower. Strange, but that seems likely.
The researchers were staring at the excavated outer wall of the ruin. Although much of it remained buried in soil, there were openings that could only be window frames meant for ventilation, and the way the supports were constructed did not resemble a cave ceiling support but rather something built as a tower. If it truly had been a tower, why was it buried underground? The first thought would be subsidence, yet above the ruin stretched a forest. How many hundreds of years had it been buried? Further investigation would reveal the truth. While the researchers discussed this, Sai called out.
Hey researchers, the lower floor is clear.
Sai poked his head out from the stairway leading down. The researchers nodded.
Thank you.
They joined him and descended the stairs behind him.
No traps on this floor, but I found what looks like several broken control panels.
Control panels? Did you touch them?
Inside ruins, touching the wrong thing could trigger traps or other disasters. If Sai had tampered with instruments, a lecture would be inevitable.
No way. I did not touch anything. Just got the feeling they adjust something. I will show you.
Sai led them to the panels. As he said, there were several gauges and a large number of buttons. All were covered in dust and grime, corroded with age.
You realized this was a control panel? Just by looking.
No one knew what each part did or how to operate it. The style was unlike anything seen before, not only in Tuar but in any known ancient ruin. Yet a mere adventurer had recognized it at a glance.
It was just a guess. I have been an adventurer a long time. You were the one who distinguished himself at the Tark ruins, correct?
The Tark ruins were discovered along the coast of the continent where the Kingdom of Tuar lay. During that investigation, a researcher accidentally pressed an unknown button, activating the ruin machinery. Seawater flooded the interior, and aquatic monsters poured in, causing a catastrophe.
Something like that. Anyway, please continue your work.
Sai scratched his head and laughed it off. Back then I managed because of knowledge from when I lived in Japan, he muttered to himself. He had recalled ocean panic movies he watched as a child to deal with the situation. He never expected childhood memories to be useful. Yes, this adventurer Sai was from another world. For reasons unknown, he had been transferred from Japan to this world 30 years ago. With no hope of returning, he had resolved to spend his life in the Kingdom of Tuar. Now, in his 40s, he worked mainly as an adventurer while also assisting with guild administration and training newcomers. An ordinary life for a man in his 40s in this world.
Escort team, check the lower floor.
A portly researcher shouted, a noble scholar accustomed to giving orders.
Then I will take my leave here.
Thank you. We are counting on you.
Sai rejoined the other escorts. There were 5 in total, including Sai, 2 fighters to engage monsters on the front line, 1 wizard and 1 healer for magical support from the rear, and 1 ranger who mediated, fought when needed, and checked for traps. That ranger was Sai, so as the scout, Sai descended first. At that moment, the escort team was relaxed. If this was a tower, the next level should be the first floor. There are no stairs going further down. Looking below, the spiral staircase ended at the next level. No traps, no monsters. The path here had some monsters, but inside the tower seems safe. Perhaps an old warding spell is still active. If so, monsters would not appear easily. The healer from the church murmured.
Still, it is an ancient ward. It could break at any time. Stay alert.
The mood remained calm. Then, on the first floor of the buried tower, they saw something strange. In the center of the space was a large black dot. It cast no shadow and had no sense of depth. Neither natural nor artificial objects were ever this black.
Huh? What is that?
The wizard squinted. She stepped 1 pace ahead of Sai to see better.
Do not move forward.
Huh?
In the next instant, her body was pulled toward the black dot. Sai recognized the sensation. He had experienced it before in another dungeon.
It is a teleport!
Sai grabbed the wizard from behind as she was being sucked in and threw her back up the stairs. No one knew where it would send them. A few injuries would have to be forgiven. But Sai himself was now being drawn toward the black point.
Gah!
He stabbed his blade into the floor, trying to resist.
Hey, use a rope or something.
1 fighter hurried to retrieve something from his item box magic. Too late. Sai vanished. The research team abandoned investigation of the first floor. A teleport trap is so named because no one knows where it leads. It might send someone to the dungeon entrance, or to unknown land, or above the sea, anywhere at random. Until Sai's location was confirmed, no one would enter. That is how dangerous teleport traps are. Thus, entry into the ruin was suspended until Sai's whereabouts could be determined. News spread that the adventurer Sai had gone missing due to a teleport trap. Sai found himself in a forest, but the vegetation was not that of Western Tuar. He had been pulled violently through space, bruising his body, though not severely.
Ouch!
It hurt a little. It was night. The investigation had taken place during the day, yet now it was dark. The forest was dense. From the slope, he realized he was in the mountains, and although it was night, it seemed slightly brighter than usual.
I landed on a mountain, but where am I?
At least it was not the sea or solid rock. Still, visibility was poor. The teleport aperture had vanished. He could not return that way. He would have to make his way back to Western Tuar.
For now, I should head down the mountain.
He wanted to activate magical communication to report he was alive, but it was troublesome in the dark. He postponed it. First, find a settlement, confirm location, then return. If he had been sent to another continent, that would be troublesome, but manageable. Sai was a veteran. Travel and camping were routine. Still, being alone in a mountain at night was dangerous. So he descended. Soon he saw a dark gray road. Not dirt, but paved with stone-like material. There were scattered houses. Streetlights stood at intervals and black lines ran overhead.
No way.
After a long stunned silence, he whispered. The gray road was asphalt. The black lines were power lines. He suppressed his rising emotions and walked along the sidewalk. The word stop was painted on the road, and passing cars bore Japanese license plates.
Are you kidding me?
Buildings and signs displayed Japanese text. There was no doubt. Sai stood frozen, 30 years after being transferred. A place he had dreamed of returning to but gave up on. Memories that had faded now surged back.
This is Japan!
He was dressed in light armor made from magical beast leather reinforced with magic steel. His beloved blade remained embedded in the tower. Only the empty sheath hung at his waist. The adventurous Sai, who had been transferred to another world, or rather Yamanami Saito. Through a teleport trap, he had returned to Japan. Episode 2. The place he was sent to by the ruins teleport trap was, unbelievably, Japan. The moment Sai realized he was in Japan, his mind began racing. If it was the same as the other world, judging by the position of the moon, it was likely around midnight. He did not know his current location, but if there was a road, it must connect to some city. Traffic was light. Cars occasionally passed by, but no one seemed to notice Sai. Still, Sai stared into the passing vehicles. The male driver wore a jacket and casually held the steering wheel. Seeing such an ordinary jacketed man, the kind you could find anywhere in Japan, Sai was once again convinced that this truly was Japan. And then he noticed his own appearance. Light armor made from magical beast leather reinforced with magic steel. He had used this armor for several years. He had hunted a powerful magical beast specifically to make it, commissioning a first-rate craftsman to create it. But if this was Japan, this equipment was a problem. He would look like nothing more than a middle-aged cosplayer in fantasy armor. Sai hurried into the forest. Though he had been thoroughly immersed in the common sense of another world, he recalled his time in Japan and decided to change clothes. He removed his armor and stored his equipment in another dimension using item box magic. Japan was a peaceful land. There were no monsters, no profession called adventurer. Thinking that, he considered what to wear. Japan after 30 years. Tracing his old memories, he searched for clothes that would pass in Japan. From inside his item box, he found a white shirt and black pants he had purchased in Tuar's central city. The design was simple. This should be fine. The silhouette resembled the stand-collar school uniform he used to wear. It would probably work. Still, it felt slightly chilly, so he put on a dark leather coat. It was made from the hide of a monster called a bloodhorn buffalo. Highly durable, it had often served him well on his travels. As for shoes, he only had adventurer-style boots, but few people would look that closely at footwear. It would work out somehow.
If I had a mirror, I could check, but this is barely acceptable?
That was Sai's judgment. But he was a tall man in his 40s, wearing a black coat in the middle of the night. Moreover, his body, trained as an adventurer, was heavily built. His dark brown hair had grown to shoulder length because he found going to the barber troublesome. At least he was clean-shaven. Still, a man like that standing in the mountains at midnight? If someone noticed him, he would definitely be labeled suspicious. He would end up in the newspaper as a suspicious person. Out.
Now then, what should I do?
Once again, this was Japan for the first time in 30 years, but he did not even know where he was. Since there was an asphalt road, walking along it would eventually lead to a city. That much was certain. But he did not know his current position. As he walked, Sai thought, if he reached a place with enough people, he could take a train or taxi to his hometown. No, impossible. He did not have any Japanese money. Anything he had possessed when he first transferred to the other world was long gone. He could not take a train or taxi. He had earned well as an adventurer for many years, but that income was not currency usable in Japan. Could I exchange gold coins for cash? He looked at the gold coins inside a leather pouch. Gold was traded by the gram or something like that, if he remembered correctly. If so, it might be possible to exchange them. He might even be able to return to his hometown. If he could return to his hometown, he might see his parents and younger sister again after 30 years. Joy and anxiety crossed within him. What expression would be correct? Sai recalled 30 years ago. He had transferred to another world at the beginning of his first year of high school. Since then, many years had passed. Now he was a man in his 40s. If he showed up now and said, "Long time no see," would he be forgiven? As he trudged along the midnight road, he thought alone. A man who never sent any word returns. What happens after that? The reunion itself would surely be joyful. That was certain. But the problem was what came afterward. Could Sai adapt to Japan? There was no job called adventurer. In the other world, his life had centered around being an adventurer. He had helped with administrative work at the Adventurers Guild and served as an instructor to train newcomers, but at his core, he was an adventurer. Yet the know-how he had cultivated in another world would not apply in Japan. Sai had believed he would live and die in that other world, and now, at this timing, he had returned to Japan. Could he really make it here? His emotions would not settle. His parents and sister, his partner and friends in the other world, the job he might have from now on. His thoughts refused to come together. In any case, he needed to confirm the situation. There was no point in brooding without knowing more. When he ran into a problem, he would think about it then. Sai was an adventurer. Now that he had returned to Japan, being an adventurer as a profession was over. but his spirit remained unchanged. He was not a fool who brooded inside a dungeon and worsened his own predicament. He was not an idiot who hesitated in battle and failed to make the optimal move. Assess the current situation and take the best possible action. The adventurer's spirit within Sai reached that conclusion. Even if the know-how was useless here, the soul of an adventurer would not waver. Having reached his conclusion, Sai walked along the midnight road with lighter steps than before. Assuming that walking along the road would eventually lead somewhere, he decided to head east. As he walked, Sai was surprised. He had forgotten because it was so natural in the other world, but he could feel mana in the atmosphere. In other words, this world also possessed magical power. The magic techniques he had cultivated in the other world could be used here as well. Sai's specialty was body reinforcement magic. The magical power circulating through his body functioned even in Japan. With this much mana in the air, he could move at full capability. Come to think of it, I used it in a hurry earlier, but item box magic works too. Item box magic was a spell that used one's own magical power to store and retrieve objects in another dimension. The amount that could be stored depended on one's magical capacity, but from what he had just done, there was no problem with the contents. In places where mana was thin, the item box could malfunction. Teleportation could also cause issues. In that regard as well, Sai had been fortunate. After walking briskly toward what seemed to be the urban area for several hours, he entered the city and began seeing train stations, though there were still few people around. More importantly, the occasional person he saw either fled or avoided him once they noticed him. So this outfit really was not good. He realized that he himself was suspicious. A tall, long-haired, well-built stranger in a black coat approaching at night would make anyone run, thinking that he continued walking further east. At that point, Sai noticed something he had not realized earlier, but addresses were written on utility poles and such. Tokyo, Tachikawa City. He finally realized he was in Tokyo and began walking toward the more central parts of the city. One supplementary note. Sai himself had completely forgotten this, but although he believed he was simply walking, he was actually reinforcing his body as he moved, resulting in considerable speed. It was closer to race walking or marathon pace. The teenagers, awake at midnight, saw a tall man in a black coat striding rapidly and panicked, but Sai did not notice. In this way, Sai passed through Tachikawa, then Kokubunji, then Mitaka. The trains were not yet running, so he intended to walk as far as he could. After continuing on and passing the Kano, Sai saw something strange.
What is that?
Shrouded in mist so that its full height could not be seen, a massive tower stood there. He could only perceive it as a large brown tower, but even from this distance he felt intense magical power emanating from it. At the very least, 30 years ago in Japan, there had been no such tower. There should not have been. Japan is not so different from another world, huh? He did not know what was inside, but in the other world, it was common knowledge that flora and fauna changed due to magical energy. In other words, there was a high possibility of monsters. The eastern sky gradually brightened. The sun was beginning to rise.
Maybe I can make use of my adventurer know-how after all.
Episode 3. The alarm on his smartphone rang, and Sai realized it was morning as he woke up. Still half asleep, he washed his face and brushed his teeth. It was already mid-September. The intense heat wave had faded, but the lingering heat of late summer still hung in the air. He turned on the air conditioner and looked at his smartphone. In the relaxed time afforded by being unemployed, he drank coffee and thought about what to do today. Sai, who had returned from another world, was living a perfectly ordinary life like any normal Japanese person. Some time had passed since he returned to Japan due to the ruins teleport trap. Currently, Sai was living in a renovated former small factory. On the day he transferred back, Sai went to a police box and explained his situation. Of course, he could not say that he had been in another world, so he somehow glossed over the details while explaining the circumstances. As a result, he discovered that his name was on the missing persons list. Before he knew it, he was reunited with his parents. The parents he met again after 30 years were elderly. Not quite frail, but both in their 70s, their arms and legs thin. He was surprised at how small they seemed. It was fortunate that his parents had not passed away during the time he was gone, and that he could see them again. His parents were now living healthily with his younger sister and her husband, free of any major illness. Before the reunion, Sai had been extremely anxious and nervous. He no longer resembled his high school self and feared they might not even recognize him. However, his parents and sister recognized him as Yamanami Saito. They had an emotional reunion as a family, But what followed was difficult. Since he had been listed as missing, there were various administrative procedures to handle, which was unavoidable. The hardest part was explaining where he had been all this time. Speculation arose that he might have been taken to a dangerous overseas region, among other theories, but the truth was that he had gone to another world. To prove that he had been in another world, he would have to show magic or items from there. But what would happen if he did? If he was lucky, he might merely become a spectacle. But he might also be treated as research material in some laboratory. He did not yet understand modern Japan fully, but in any world, rare things carry value. There was the possibility of becoming entangled in trouble beyond his imagination. He had no noble backing like in the other world. If things took a bad turn, what would happen? Regardless of what Sai wanted, his parents and his sister's family would likely be affected. He could not face the parents who said they had continued searching for him if he caused them trouble. For that reason, he told his family the truth, but publicly he claimed he had been wandering overseas. He hesitated over how to tell his family about the other world, but when he finally did, they accepted it more easily than he expected. It was thanks to the tower, commonly known as Shinjuku Tower. Several years after Sai went missing, in the year 2000, that Shinjuku Tower suddenly appeared. It swallowed everything around it. This phenomenon occurred all over the world, and dungeons reportedly emerged in various countries. Combined with the occult boom at the time, it caused considerable panic. As a result, his parents believed, even if they did not fully understand another world, that such things might be possible. The reality they had taken for granted had been overturned by something utterly unscientific and mysterious. In a world where such things could happen, the eldest son of the Yamanami family had been taken somewhere far away but safely returned home. That was enough, they concluded. If that meant Sai could now live happily with his family, that would have been ideal. But reality was not so simple. Currently, his parents and his sister's family lived together under one roof. His sister and her husband had a high school-aged son. From Sai's perspective, he was his nephew. The five of them lived modestly together, but adding Sai, who had returned from another world, was another matter. There was simply no room for him to live there. For a while he stayed in the living room, but honestly, a large, tall man was more of a nuisance than anything. Not only his parents and sister, but also his brother-in-law and high school nephew were there. The older brother of a wife who had gone missing, or the older brother of a mother. He must have been difficult to handle. His brother-in-law was a good-natured man and apologetically said, "I would like to figure something out about a room." But it was Sai who had suddenly appeared. Sai was the one who felt deeply apologetic. After spending the first few days in the living room, he realized it would be difficult for him to move freely and unbearable to remain like that. While he was considering what to do, his father made a proposal. It was to move into a nearby old factory site. It had been a small neighborhood factory active in his grandfather's generation, but it was closed during that time and left unused ever since. It was too small and too deteriorated to rent out as a factory, and demolition had even been considered. However, demolition required funds, and since the land had been passed down through generations, there was hesitation about selling it. Such was the old, small factory site. Sai remembered playing there as a child. He understood his father's reluctance to let it go, but it was severely deteriorated, and repairs would cost a considerable amount. It would mean pushing their long-returned eldest son into a shabby and dirty place. His father felt very apologetic, but Sai was deeply grateful. Fortunately, electricity, gas, and water were already connected. If renovated, it could be used. Once the decision was made, they moved quickly. However, as his father said, renovation required a significant sum of money. Even if he applied for a loan, Sai had no credit in modern Japan. He wondered what to do, but here his gold coins proved useful. He possessed a considerable quantity of gold coins. Inside his item box were continent-wide standard gold coins and gold coins from the Kingdom of Tuar. He had also deposited money in the kingdom's bank, but even so, a substantial amount remained stored in his item box. As a veteran adventurer and instructor at the Adventurers Guild, Sai had earned a respectable income. He melted some of his gold coins into ingots and sold them. With the modest fortune he obtained, Sai carried out the factory renovation. He created an environment fit for human habitation. Thus, Sai secured a base of operations for his activities in Japan. During the day, he mostly worked on improving his factory home or went for walks. At dinner time or on weekends, he visited his sister's family, listening to stories about what had happened and recent events while learning the common sense of modern Japan. He acquired the latest smartphone and began checking the internet with clumsy fingers. When he had been in Japan before, there had been pagers or simple mobile phones. Now there were smartphones, and even students commonly owned them. When he was a student, His parents had not bought him one, yet apparently they happily bought one for their grandson. It was a mild shock, though he kept that to himself. Perhaps 30 years of time had changed common sense. Still, Sai well understood the convenience of easy communication. In the other world, there had been something called magical communication. It could only send something like mail, but it had helped him immensely during his adventurer days. Wherever there was mana, communication was possible, even deep inside caves or across continents. From rescue situations to casual daily messages, it had been incredibly convenient. However, even magical communication apparently could not connect between Earth and another world. Now it produced no response at all.
I am alive. However, there is no method of return.
Several months had passed since he sent that message. Naturally, there had still been no response from the other world. Episode 4. It happened one evening after dinner. That day, Sai was relaxing in the living room with his parents and his younger sister and her husband.
Here, tea. So, big brother, are you getting used to life here at least a little?
Thanks. More or less. I am still confused by how peaceful everything is.
Was the other world really that dangerous?
Of course. I had to hunt monsters every day.
Monsters like this?
He thrust his smartphone toward Sai. On the screen was a small figure resembling a starving demon from hell. A filthy little goblin was displayed.
This is a goblin, right? Huh? Why is there a picture of this? Then what about this one?
His nephew quickly showed the next image.
That is an eyeball demon.
The eyeball demon shown was what adventurers would call a rookie killer. He went on to show various other monsters. These all appear in Shinjuku Tower.
That tower, huh?
The tower, commonly known as Shinjuku Tower. Around the year 2000, a modern-day mystery that appeared in Shinjuku-gyoen. Apparently a massive fog suddenly formed. And then, with a tremendous strange noise, it appeared. This was how events unfolded at the time. When the police and the self-defense forces investigated the tower and surrounding area, they discovered a large number of monsters inside. As a result, the government decided to seal off the tower. They barricaded the surrounding area and discussed how to handle the affected district. 36 hours after sealing the tower, a massive number of monsters poured out. The police and self-defense forces dealt with them. They then resumed investigation inside the tower. At first, they attempted suppression using firearms. However, after some time, monsters that were immune to guns appeared. It was confirmed that attacks other than firearms, such as swords, were effective. After that, investigations continued without using guns, but since firearms, the symbol and greatest invention of modernity, could not be used, progress in conquering the tower was slow. Eventually, they somehow completely secured the first floor and tried to proceed upward step by step, but even then, large numbers of monsters attacked the first floor again. After this situation repeated many times, the rules of the tower became clear. If no humans are inside the tower, monsters will emerge from it after about 36 hours. The use of firearms is basically prohibited. If guns do not work on a monster, even missiles will not work. Someone must be fighting 24 hours a day. Whether day or night, someone has to be engaged in combat. Those appeared to be the rules of the tower. However, the self-defense forces and police had their regular duties as well. Due to personnel and budget limitations, they could not focus solely on the tower. Because of this situation, the government decided to recruit civilian cooperators. They broadly called for people willing to fight monsters and aim to conquer the tower, a fantasy world-like structure straight out of a game. These civilian cooperators came to be widely known as adventurers, and the tower itself was called Shinjuku Tower. The slogan used in recruitment was this: "Adventurers, conquer Shinjuku Tower." Records state that the earliest adventurers were often fighters, martial artists, or former self-defense force members. Centered on them, the conquest of Shinjuku Tower began. Sometime later, certain adventurers began to display techniques that should not have been possible. They produced mysterious auras along the trajectory of their swords. People who manifested so-called skills began to appear. Furthermore, individuals capable of phenomena referred to as magic started to emerge. At first, these phenomena occurred only inside the tower. Gradually, however, people began appearing who could use magic even outside it. This was popularly called awakening. Various measurements were attempted, but how skills and magic are generated remains unknown. Although traces believed to be magical power have been measured, it is still largely an unexplored domain. By the 2010s, even minors who had awakened could receive permission to enter the tower if they were 18 or older. The conquest of the tower became a major trend that continued for a quarter of a century. One might even say it became part of everyday life.
I see.
Listening to this, Sai recalled the moment he had transferred to Japan. He had been surprised that he could sense magical power. That must mean the tower either generated or activated magic. In Sai's estimation, before the tower appeared, the mana in the atmosphere must have been scarce. By the standards of the other world, if this much magical power filled the air, natural-born mages would inevitably be born. If there is little mana in the atmosphere, magical power cannot be generated within the body, which means natural mages could not be born. It was only a hypothesis, but probably not far off. While he was vaguely thinking this, his sister spoke.
So you really are interested in this kind of thing, aren't you?
She looked surprised as she picked at some food.
It was my job.
Hunting monsters and reducing threats. That was the primary job of an adventurer.
My main job was exterminating monsters. Monsters appear in places dense with mana or where it stagnates, so you deal with them. And places like towers or caves are generally called dungeons. There are ores and treasures that can only be obtained there, so you hunt monsters while gathering materials and so on. I spent most of my life doing that.
An adventure fantasy like a game, but in another world. His parents frowned as they listened. They had probably never imagined their son had been in such dangerous places. His nephew, on the other hand, listened with shining eyes. For Sai, it had not been a game or manga-style adventure tale, but days filled with hardship and struggle. Still, he understood the feeling of admiration.
By the way, do treasure chests appear in Shinjuku Tower?
What was it again? Something amazing appeared, right? The shiny one. What Mom is talking about is the Raijin sword.
Right, the Raijin sword.
His nephew happily showed him something called the Raijin sword on his smartphone. The image showed a sword with an extravagant design.
The user can designate a spot and generate lightning there.
Oh, really?
As he listened, Sai widened his eyes. He realized it was different from the Raijin sword he had seen in the other world. There, the Raijin sword was literally said to have been bestowed by the Thunder God. He had seen it once, and the design was completely different. Judging from his nephew's explanation, the performance must be worlds apart as well.
If all it does is generate lightning, even a shop-sold sword engraved with a spell formula could do that.
After that, his nephew continued explaining about Shinjuku Tower. From what he heard, just as he had imagined, various materials and items could be obtained. Monster materials and various items were purchased by the government or companies and sent into research and development across many fields.
Man, I want to go to Shinjuku Tower too.
No, it's dangerous.
You can't help but admire it. If I were a bit younger, I would have gone sightseeing myself.
Maybe I will go take a look.
Sai was currently unemployed. He had adapted to modern Japan, and since he had wealth from melting down and selling the gold coins he accumulated in the other world as ingots, he did not need to work. But in the peaceful daily life, he felt uncomfortable as his body grew dull. He needed to think of some kind of job to do. If he became an adventurer conquering Shinjuku Tower, he could make use of his past experience. It might even be his calling.
Yeah, you could get in, big brother. If you go to the Adventurers Guild, I think you can become one right away.
You have to get a license first.
A license. I see. So it's a licensing system.
The Adventurers Guild in the other world had licenses as well. He nodded to himself, assuming it was similar.
I am looking forward to your stream, Uncle.
Stream?
According to his nephew, apparently everyone active in the tower is required to broadcast via camera. This was not for entertainment purposes, but to prevent lawlessness in a place where the law does not fully reach.
There is a government channel prepared for conquering the tower.
She turned on the television in the living room and connected to the internet. She opened a channel labeled Tower Tube, a government distribution site. Before entering the top page, a warning appeared. There may be grotesque imagery displayed. She pressed the button labeled Agree. She then selected one of the recommended adventurer channels. The screen showed a male adventurer conquering the tower. Alongside the broadcast video, information such as his real name and the floor he was challenging was displayed.
So, this is how it works. To Sai, the idea that unknown people were watching his adventures felt unpleasant. It was an invasion of privacy. However, if everything is displayed like this, It certainly discourages wrongdoing. He could see how it helps prevent crime.
Does this show everyone currently inside Shinjuku Tower?
That's the rule.
At this very moment, thousands of adventurers were streaming. Apparently, the stream only stops when they leave Shinjuku Tower. The man currently on screen was in a 3-person party, conquering the 2nd floor.
I get that it's to prevent crime, but doesn't that mean people end up seeing unpleasant things? Like monsters being killed, or adventurers getting injured. It's not something you would want Mom watching.
The AI puts mosaic over the blood, so it's not that scary.
AI.
AI had existed when Sai was a child, but it was more a topic of science fiction movies. Seeing his surprised expression, his tech-savvy nephew explained. He switched channels to show a party in the middle of battle. They were on the 8th floor fighting a group of goblins. Sure enough, heavy mosaic was applied over the injured adventurer's arm and over the goblins that were barely alive and covered in wounds. According to his nephew, a computer automatically analyzes the footage and applies mosaic to blood, corpses, and similar elements. If an adventurer suffers a severe injury, the AI judges it and triggers an emergency alert. An elite rescue team formed from the Adventurers Guild is dispatched in response.
He had been shocked by smartphones, but Japan, after 30 years, felt like living in the future.
Episode 5. He learned about Shinjuku Tower from his family. The matter of mandatory streaming surprised him, but his interest in Shinjuku Tower only grew stronger. There was something almost fateful about becoming an adventurer again after returning to Japan. Still, if the threat level was only that much, he could probably advance quite far solo without getting injured. His parents looked worried, but he pushed through firmly. He was happy that they cared, but in the other world he had been a veteran adventurer. When it came to fighting monsters, he could confidently say he was among the most experienced even in Japan. Several days after learning about the tower, he checked various adventurer streams and researched strategy information on Shinjuku Tower while preparing his own equipment. He had left his favorite blade in the other world, but he still had replacement blades in his item box, along with a large stock of weapons and armor. For some things, like camping gear and a portable stove, he decided to use items purchased in Japan. In terms of combat against monsters, the other world seemed more advanced. But for daily life tools, products made on Earth appeared superior. He reviewed the information on Shinjuku Tower again. No adventurer had fully conquered it yet, and there was no information beyond the 26th floor. Above the 20th floor, the exterior was covered in dense fog, and even the total number of floors had not been revealed. However, based on the size of the first floor and the height of each level, it was estimated to be roughly 30 stories tall. It was a tower shrouded in mystery. Inside the tower, electricity and radio signals functioned. Yet whenever someone tried to examine the exterior using airplanes or drones, radio interference and instrument malfunctions occurred, or a suddenly appearing wyvern would shoot them down. After downing aircraft or drones, the wyvern would leisurely disappear back into the tower's fog. It seemed to detest attempts to gather information from the outside. The only thing that could be said from this was that the tower had some kind of will. No one knew who or what it was, nor what it wanted. But Sai assumed that some entity was definitely involved. He had seen such dungeons several times in the other world. In that sense as well, he was well suited to conquering Shinjuku Tower. The day after his preparations were complete, Sai headed to the Shinjuku Adventurers Guild. The Shinjuku Adventurers Guild had been built adjacent to Shinjuku Tower.
So, whether in another world or in Japan, what I do does not really change.
In the other world, too, adventurers' guilds were often built near large dungeons. Even if the people differ, the way of thinking must be similar. Muttering to himself, he entered the guild. Inside was a large reception desk, and at surrounding tables adventurers and related personnel chatted noisily. It was a sight he had seen in the other world. Compared to the Adventurers Guild in the other world, this one was larger and more spacious. The atmosphere resembled a ward office or city hall. According to the guide board, there were various service counters and facilities required for adventurers, and weapons, armor, and dungeon equipment were sold there. There even appeared to be bathing facilities.
Sai approached the reception desk and stated that he wanted to obtain a license to enter the tower.
Hey, aren't you already an adventurer?
I am embarrassed to say this is my first time.
In that case, please apply at the Adventurer License Center next door.
Brushing it off with a wry smile, Sai was directed to the Adventurer License Center. His adventurer license from the other world would not work in Japan. In the guild's annex stood the Adventurer License Center. Here, lectures and practical training required to obtain an adventurer license were conducted daily. He had assumed that once he applied, he could immediately enter Shinjuku Tower, but apparently he needed to attend the annex for several days to obtain the license. In the other world, there had been lectures for adventurers as well, but the initial course lasted only a few hours, and more detailed lectures were optional. In modern Japan, it was not a matter of taking a quick class and then diving into a dungeon. This was probably one of the differences between the other world and Japan. Even if the name adventurer was the same, the role differed. Since common sense was different as well, there was probably much to learn. Feeling excited about those differences, Sai headed to the first lecture. When he arrived, there were about 15 other participants. They were young, mostly in their 20s, with a few older attendees. Sai, by contrast, stood out as a man in his 50s. The attendees exchanged glances, some with curiosity, others with mild amusement at Sai's presence. The lecture began with a review of basic dungeon navigation, followed by a demonstration of equipment maintenance. The instructor, a wiry man in his 30s, spoke with brisk efficiency, occasionally pausing to answer questions. By the end of the session, Sai had taken detailed notes and felt a renewed sense of purpose. The next topic was the new streaming camera system, designed to transmit real-time footage from the dungeon to the annex. The instructor demonstrated the camera's features, including night vision, thermal imaging, and voice modulation. Sai listened intently, nodding as the instructor explained the system's advantages for team coordination. There were 5 lectures in total, and Sai continued attending the license center. The number of sessions showed how thorough it was, but knowledge is a weapon. There were surely differences between the other world and Japan. He made sure to listen carefully, especially regarding dungeon information. There was also a test, but as long as one remembered the lecture content, the questions were straightforward. There were also 5 practical sessions. These included basic combat training and instruction on how to move inside a dungeon. As for movement techniques, Sai had even served as a scout in the other world. To him, it was common sense. If anything, he felt he could be the one standing at the podium. What impressed him in the practical sessions was that a virtual dungeon had been created inside the license center. Robots were placed inside, and they would fall once a certain amount of damage was dealt. There were designated strike points, and hitting those points would cause them to fall according to a judgment system. If the attack power was too weak, they would stand back up, allowing one's ability to be measured. It taught how to move inside a dungeon and was highly educational. If he ever returned to the other world, he would like to share this system with the Adventurers Guild there. With golems, something similar could likely be achieved. Such thoughts crossed Sai's mind. In his heart, the other world still remained. In combat training, they conducted mock battles assuming fights against humanoid monsters. Beginner weapons and armor were lent out, and everyone fought each other in turn. The weapons were all wooden, but if one struck an unarmored area, it would hurt significantly. The match formats included one-on-one as well as one versus multiple opponents. For those who only wanted to sightsee inside the tower, these mock battles might be tough. However, there were many humanoid monsters like skeletons and goblins inside Shinjuku Tower. Combat training between people was important for accumulating battle experience. After several days of lectures and qualification exams, Sai successfully completed everything and officially became an adventurer in Japan. His license listed him as an F-rank adventurer. It started at F, then went to E, D, C, B, and A. There was apparently an S rank above that. Sai assumed it was equivalent to the special class rank in the other world, a special title granted to a one-of-a-kind adventurer who cannot be replaced. The ranking standards were apparently global, not just Japanese, adopting the same evaluation criteria as other countries. He held up the brand-new adventurer license he had received at the counter. Sai felt his heart race at the thought of starting again as a beginner after so long. Now then, at last, he could truly begin the conquest of Shinjuku Tower.